On 5 News, the interest rates cut to an all-time low. It's now just 0.25% as the Bank of England encourages us to borrow and spend more to try to avoid recession. But the governor tells me despite his gloomy economic prospects, people should feel reassured. If you're worried about paying your bills, if you're worried you're going to be able to hang on to your job, you have a right to feel really concerned at the moment, don't you?
Well, if you're worried about those things, you should feel a bit better today.
Also this evening, a woman stabbed to death on a London street. 5 others were injured, but police rule out terrorism. New calls to crack down on illegal puppy smuggling, the crime that costs owners thousands and animals their lives. The digital devices that take over our lives, how we're all spending far too long looking at a screen. And anyone got a smaller flag? Andy Murray to lead Team GB in Rio tomorrow night with a royal seal of approval. Hello and welcome to 5 News. I'm Sian Williams. It's good news for borrowers, but bad news for long-suffering savers. The Bank of England has slashed interest rates to the lowest levels ever. And the announcement came with a gloomy forecast for the future. Britain may avoid recession if we borrow and spend more, but there will be little growth either way, and inflation and unemployment may rise. Here's our political editor, Andy Bell.
The vote to leave the EU is a huge change in the economic weather, and it's the Bank of England's job to react. So today, it's cut the bank base rate to 0.25%, the first change to interest rates in 7 years. The shock of Brexit also meant the governor and his team chalked up their biggest ever downgrade for the forecast for economic growth. So time for action.
There is a clear case for stimulus, and stimulus now, in order to be there when the economy really needs it, to have an effect when the economy really needs it. So this is about cushioning the shock.
In this South London restaurant, they were digesting the news. Would the rate cut make any difference to the owner, for instance, who's just set up here?
It will, because we financed our business through the traditional route of a bank loan, and it happens to be a tracker loan. So cutting the interest rate does mean that I have a little bit less to pay back.
Julia was exchanging on a flat today. There was just one snag with the mortgage.
There's been so much uncertainty that every day has sort of brought something different, and thought, should I, shouldn't I? And in the end, I've decided to go with it. But
With a fixed rate?
With a fixed rate, but hearing this doesn't fill me with great joy.
First-time buyer Liliana, though, is very happy.
I feel excited, and I'm happy that this happened because I really want to buy a house. And I want to get, I don't want to pay too much.
So good news for borrowers, bad news for savers, but the government is still welcoming it.
And the measures that have been taken today are designed to ensure that any increase in unemployment as a result of the economic slowdown is kept to the absolute minimum possible, and to support economic growth through the next 18 months, 2 years, as we face this period of uncertainty as we negotiate our exit from the European Union.
Right now, the priority is to keep the UK economy moving. The Bank of England believes it's made a start on that today. Andy Bell, 5 News.
Well, I sat down with the Governor of the Bank of England earlier and asked him what he thought this huge package of measures would achieve. Governor, this is an enormous package of measures, one of the biggest in the bank's history. What do you want to achieve by it?
Well, what we want to do is, in a timely fashion and comprehensive fashion, to support the adjustment that this economy is going through. We're going to have a new relationship with Europe, ultimately new relationships with the rest of the world. That naturally brings a period of uncertainty. Some businesses are holding back, maybe some households are holding back on purchases. We want to provide some stimulus to this economy.
You want to get people spending?
Well, we want people to spend and invest in smart ways, and we're providing stimulus, we think, in a smart way, in a way that reaches through the financial system and goes directly to businesses and households. So we don't want this lost rattling around the City of London, so we've designed it very carefully in order to avoid that. We've used all the powers and insights of the Bank of England to do that. So this is about supporting the adjustment at a period when, growth has slowed.
The question is, I mean, you've thrown everything at it that you possibly can. Well, almost everything.
We haven't thrown everything at it.
Well, you could, I suppose, reduce the interest rates to zero. Is that a real possibility? Or even go further, negative?
Well, first thing on negative, not a fan of negative interest rates. What we have said is that we think interest rates could go lower. They could get close to zero, but to a positive number. So people shouldn't have that concern that all of a sudden interest rates are going to go negative. So we could lower it a bit, and that would provide a bit more stimulus if that were appropriate. But we could do other things on all the other elements of the package.
If you are on a low income at the moment, if you're worried about paying your bills, if you're worried you're going to be able to hang on to your job, you have a right to feel really concerned at the moment.
Well, and that's exactly what we worry about. And if you're worried about those things, you should feel a bit better today.
Really?
Yeah, because the Bank of England has acted. We've acted now. We haven't waited until these effects fully manifest. We haven't waited until a bunch of people have lost their jobs. Hundreds of thousands of people have lost their jobs.
I know, and you must feel that personally.
We do feel that responsibility. And so we've looked to provide the stimulus, building on other measures that we've taken, in order to minimize the effect of this adjustment, this necessary adjustment in the economy.
And your advice to our viewers who may be relying on their savings, may be worried about their job, may be worried about paying those bills, what would it be today?
My advice is that those risks have been diminished by the actions of the Bank of England.
You said this would happen if there was a vote to leave the EU. You were accused of doom-mongering. Were you right?
Well, it's clear that we said as a committee that we felt that if the vote were to leave, that there would be a period where growth was materially lower and inflation somewhat higher. The forecast we've just put out today is that growth is materially lower, inflation somewhat higher. But it's not just the forecast. You see it with businesses, you see it with consumer confidence, you see it with other indicators. That is what's happening. Now,
will we get a recession?
Our view is that we are going to have growth, small positive growth in the second half of this year, and gradually picking up from there. So our central view is no. What we've done today makes it less likely.
Governor, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean.
Mark Carney speaking to me earlier. Let's go back now to our political editor, Andy Bell. And he was very reassuring us. I suppose he had to be, really, Andy. The question that everybody's going to be asking is it going to work?
Well, as you said, it's a big package of measures, as you put to him, not only that cut in interest rates, but also making tens of billions of pounds available to commercial banks to encourage them to lend to the rest of us. But it's really here now, number 11, the home of the Chancellor of the Exchequer, that attention shifts, because what is the government's action going to be? We're probably going to have to wait until November for the autumn statement. By then, we'll have maybe 6 months more of information about what's really going on in the economy. At that point, though, will they believe that they have to keep stimulating the economy, trying to boost what we're all doing, for instance, with tax cuts? But beyond that, there is also the bigger picture in terms of what the government can do. What are they going to be able to negotiate between the UK and our European partners and other economies around the world? Because those trading relationships are going to be the basis of our future prosperity. And that is what is going to determine whether there really is a brighter future for the UK economy. Because in the short term, according to what the bankers had to say today, it does look a bit grimmer.
Andy, thanks for that. And if you'd like to see more of my interview with Mark Carney, just head over to our 5 News YouTube channel. Other news, and police say a knife attack in central London that left an American woman dead and 5 other people injured was likely to have been triggered by mental health issues, not terrorism. A 19-year-old from Norway is now being questioned on suspicion of murder. In what is perhaps a sign of how tense things are in the capital, armed police were on the scene within minutes using a taser to subdue the suspect. Julian Drucker reports.
Seconds after he allegedly killed 1 person and stabbed 5 others. Officers are seen here surrounding the suspect they've just brought down with a taser stun gun. The aftermath of a spontaneous attack where victims were selected at random. But terrorism, it appears, was not the motive. On one of London's most prominent streets, the body of an American woman who was thought to have been in her 60s is guarded by police. This cyclist, who wants to remain anonymous, witnessed the desperate attempts to save the woman's life.
She wasn't talking, she wasn't. This Spanish girl that was having her in the lab, trying to talk and to keep her alive. Never got any answer back from her.
Paramedics say they gave extensive treatment to the victim, but they couldn't save her and she died here. The knife used to kill her is believed to have been found right next to where she lay.
In the hours after the incident, police were considering terrorism as a line of inquiry, a theory which was eventually eliminated.
All of the work that we have done so far increasingly points to this tragic incident as having been triggered by mental health issues. So far, we have found no evidence of radicalisation that would suggest that the man in our custody is in any way motivated by terrorism.
For Helen Edwards, the attack evoked terrible memories of what she witnessed 11 years ago. Just a few hundred metres away, Tavistock Square, and the July the 7th suicide bombings.
Terrorism threats are always at the back of your mind as well, especially where we are so near to one of the 7/7 attack sites. But at the same time, it just didn't feel quite as big as what happened with 7/7. It wasn't so anxiety provoking.
Britain's biggest police force says it's prepared for the sort of attacks seen across Europe. This wasn't one of them, but it demonstrated the sort of fear that currently exists.
And no, it wasn't terrorism related, but it was no less tragic, was it, Julian?
Sian, it's not terrorism, but the spectre of terrorism has been raised. That's because in the hours after the attack, the Assistant Commissioner couldn't rule it out. But it is so hard to rule out anything that early on in an investigation. It took the Met Police 14 hours to stand down that line of inquiry. They'll be pleased that they could do it so rapidly. They'll be pleased as well that they could get a team here so quickly last night. Tonight, I understand that only one of those victims now remains in hospital. Their injuries are not said to be life-threatening. That 19-year-old suspect is still being questioned by police, and his home has been searched by detectives.
Julian, thank you. Still to come on the programme. Thousands of puppies are smuggled into the UK every year in terrible conditions. We meet some of the survivors. And are we a nation in need of an internet detox? All that and more after the break. Hello and welcome back. You're watching 5 News. Thousands of puppies are being smuggled into the UK every year. The dogs are packed tightly into cars and vans and driven across Europe, but many of them die within weeks of arriving. And the welfare of the dogs isn't the only cost. Many of their new owners are hit by vets' bills running into thousands of pounds. Warren Nettleford reports.
These dogs aren't meant to be here, and so for now, home is in quarantine. They were smuggled into the country illegally. The dogs are being held near Dover, cared for by the Dogs Trust.
With some of these puppies, when they first arrive here, they're sort of very withdrawn. They're very, very scared. Who knows what sort of conditions they were in previous to here. When they start getting familiarised with who comes in and who feeds them, they come towards the kennel front. And again, as we do this sort of gradual habituation programme, then you really start to see them come ahead.
You've spotted they're all puppies, fashionable types too, often known as handbag dogs because of their size. They're in real demand, fueling the trade. The Dogs Trust have seized 400 dogs since December, mainly from Eastern Europe.
I think what tends to happen is people are pressurised into actually buying that puppy now or within 24 hours, or else that puppy has gone. The other thing that you'll find is that they may want to help with convenience. They may say, well, we'll meet you in a lay-by, we'll meet you in a service station, or even deliver the puppy to your home. And I think these things are real warning signals.
1 in 10 smuggled puppies are at risk of dying within their first 3 weeks. Here, they receive urgent medical care.
I don't think people are quite aware what happens to them in between saying, yes, I'd like that puppy photograph, and getting it. They're not quite sure what happens in between. This is what happens in between. They very often get seized because they're too young to have their rabies vaccination, and so we have to quarantine them for 3 weeks to make sure they're all okay.
Pugs, dachshunds, alongside English and French bull terriers, make up 80% of the dogs seized. Potential owners are being asked to think carefully before buying. The welfare of many dogs is at stake. Warren Ettelford, 5 News.
Video has emerged of the panic on board a plane which crash-landed in Dubai yesterday.
This way, not the side. Leave everything, leave your bags. Leave your bags behind!
Some passengers are seen pulling bags from overhead lockers despite being ordered by cabin crew to leave their belongings behind. The plane later exploded. Everyone on board survived, but a firefighter was killed trying to tackle the blaze. Jeremy Corbyn has laid out his plans to rebuild Britain. The Labour leader says he would ensure full employment by creating 1 million jobs, building new infrastructure. Mr Corbyn will go head-to-head this evening with rival Owen Smith in their first debate, ahead of the Labour leadership vote in September.
We'll build an economy that works for all, with good jobs in every single part of the country, and I'm utterly determined we shall reach the whole of the country so that at the end of the first term of the Labour government we won't be talking about left behind Britain, we'll be talking about inclusion in Britain.
Now, it might seem like London 2012 was only yesterday, but tomorrow, Rio 2016 will kick off with their Olympic opening ceremony. Leading Team GB and bearing the flag will be Andy Murray. He and the other British athletes have high medal hopes, and as Simon Vigar reports, they've been given a royal send-off.
He's been chosen as the flag bearer, and Andy Murray got a fair bit of practice at the Team GB photo call. The London 2012 gold medalist was doing as he was told, but that meant obscuring the president of the British Olympic Association, also known as Princess Anne. Well, these things happen, and you'd be hard-pressed to come up with a more British phrase than "that'll have to do."
That'll have to do. Okay.
That won't do for the medals target. It's 48, which will be a record at an away games. The flag bearer is certainly hoping for one and says he's honoured to lead Team GB.
I was speechless, really. I didn't know what to say. I was kind of just repeating myself, I think, a lot. I was saying how honoured I was and humbled, and, you know, I would be extremely proud to do it. So thank you very much for the honour of getting to do that.
Getting the Olympic flame to the opening ceremony involves a military operation. Many Brazilians have protested at the cost of the Games, and it takes this sort of security to protect the flame. The opening ceremony is tomorrow night, but once again the football has started early, and given the empty seats here, organisers will be hoping for better ticket sales later in the Games. Team GB got this royal backing today.
We have some of the most passionate supporters in the world, and we cannot wait to cheer on our athletes together this time around in Rio.
We can't wait to watch everyone compete. Good luck.
It's a feel-good video hoping to revive that unforgettable summer of 4 years ago.
Let's top 2012. Bring on the great.
Bringing on the Great Britain flag will be Andy, heralding another fantastic Olympic fortnight. Simon Vigar, 5 News.
Do you spend too long on the internet, emails at work, Facebook before bed? Well, you're not alone. According to a new report, too much time glued to our phones, tablets and computers is stopping us sleeping, getting in the way of work and even preventing us seeing family and friends. Peter Lane reports.
We've never been so connected, and we've never been so worried about it. For all the positives of smart devices, social media and online access, connectivity creep is taking over our lives. So while I quickly tweet some photos of my trip to the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, do visitors soaking up the sights here need a screen break? Dare they detox?
I could probably do like a couple of weeks, but probably not a month.
A couple of weeks, you heard it, Dad. You heard it here first.
I think it's
2 weeks off.
I think it's struggle. First thing you do in the morning, isn't it? Just get up and go online and see what's going on.
I think most people, if they're honest with themselves, they think that they do spend too much time online. I think it's become an easy habit.
Now, instead of looking at real things that are right in front of us, we are increasingly staring at screens. And it seems we don't find it a wholly positive experience. A survey of adults and teenagers found that most people, 59%, feel hooked on their devices. 11% admit to going online or checking apps more than 50 times a day. And 34% of adults have tried digital detox, most for a day, some for a whole month. The survey found time online disrupts our sleep, working lives, school studies and friendships. So is having the world in our pockets doing us real-life harm?
One of the dangers is really that we're just not spending enough time in person. I think it's important to take time out, step away from the internet from time to time and really get back to what your priorities are. And then you can make online work for your priorities rather than making online itself the priority.
A month-long detox might sound scary. Maybe just a digital day off would help. The technology at our fingertips has given us more choice than ever. But are we ready to choose switching off? Peter Lane, 5 News.
We're switching off soon. Before we do, Danny's joined us to tell us what's coming up on 5 News tonight.
Absolutely, Sean. I know you've been speaking to Mark Carney. I'm actually going to be speaking to a personal finance expert and finding out what that historic rate cut means for you. If you've got a mortgage, loans, a pension or savings, we'll find out what you can expect. Plus the pupils who are arguing for England. This team of teenagers have just beaten more than 50 countries to win the World Schools Debating Championships. I'll be speaking to one of them.
Thank you very much, Danny. That is it for me. Sian Welby has the weather next. Thanks for watching tonight. Goodbye for now.